Welcome to episode 10 of the Orchestration Kitchen here at Strata Identity. Today's episode, we're going to be talking about life after ForgeRock. How do you chart your own identity future? I will be your host today. My name is Chef Mark. I'm a member of the product marketing team here at Strata Identity, and I'm joined by a special guest chef once again, Tony Chan from our solutions engineering team at Strata. Chef Tony, great to see you again.
Nice to meet everyone.
Great. Well, tell you what, let's go ahead and, as we do with every episode, want to sort of set the stage with a couple of quick housekeeping things. Is simply, if you have questions throughout the episode for either Chef Tony or myself, please go ahead and use the question tool to add those. You'll see on the right side of your screen. And you're probably wondering, okay, great. What are we going to be talking about in this orchestration kitchen? So the idea of an orchestration kitchen episode is that we take the spiciest challenges that our audience has seen around identity, and we look at the ways that identity orchestration can actually help to make them quite simple. It's actually a really fun way to look at a whole new approach to identity, and that's that software approach of identity orchestration. And we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about what it is. So as we think about the agenda, Chef Tony, that we'll be discussing today, we'll lead off. You'll give us just a couple of minutes around what is identity orchestration so that everyone has a pretty good baseline for it. We'll do a recipe whiteboard. Just like any good cooking show, we're going to have just a quick layout of what we're going to be talking about and sort of an illustration of how that plays out. Then we'll actually cook live with the recipe. And any questions, we'll field those throughout, but anything that we have at the end, we'll be sure to wrap up then as well. So without further ado, if we may, Chef Tony, can you give us just a couple of minutes around what is identity orchestration?
Yes, I would love to. So identity orchestration is a new and emerging category in this identity space that Strata pioneered. One of the main reasons for identity orchestration is what is called abstraction or decoupling, which allows you to separate the authentication as well as authorization from the application stack, giving you the freedom of choice to leverage the best of breed technologies out there. In a true identity orchestration model, the application can either be modern or legacy. It allows your organizations to leverage your existing infrastructure or identity provider of your choosing, or you can migrate to a new identity service, as well as repositories like Active Directory, LDAP, databases for your authentication and authorization needs there. And it's transparent to the end user. So what you're seeing in this little flowchart is that when the user is trying to get to the applications, each of this leg of the journey, you can have the user go through whatever technologies that's going to service them. So you can use any authentication provider, any access control vendor, MFA solutions, attributes, and so forth, giving you that true flexibility to path your own way for your identity solution that the organization is looking for.
And so, Chef Tony, you talked about the fact that this can work with both modern and legacy apps. And I just want to actually call out, sometimes we bury the lead, that there's actually, in fine print off to the right, we talk about there's actually no change to the apps. We're not doing any rewriting of the applications in this process. Is that right?
Absolutely. Most times if you are using modern applications, typically modern applications support SAML or OIDC. So you have a little bit of flexibility there. It's easier to work with those type of applications. But if it's legacy apps, chances are they don't support any of those modern protocols. So you're kind of stuck. You can't really do much to them. So what we're saying is that we're able to integrate with them without you rewriting the application to do so. So no changes to the application.
That's great. And all of this is happening at runtime. Is that right? This is all happening.
Absolutely.
That's great. Well, so that's our just quick 2-minute about the underlying foundational technology that we're discussing here. So if we were going to be cooking with sous vide, we'd want to tell you how to cook with sous vide. So we're cooking with identity orchestration today. So that was sort of a baseline of what identity orchestration is. What we've got on the screen now are just a couple of wireframes, sort of a before and after scenario as we think about ForgeRock. And Chef Tony, as we think about ForgeRock on a whole, we're not here to badmouth or kick sand at ForgeRock. ForgeRock created a great product, and it's been around for a long time. I mean, it's a killer, flexible product that was based on an open source software originally that allows for a lot of customization and certainly had a lot of happy customers throughout.
Absolutely. There's so many good solutions out there, and ForgeRock has happened to be one of them. Oftentimes, when you select that identity vendor, though, they're going to lock you in. They're going to handcuff you. And this is really what we're trying to get you away from, that that no more tied to the hip in a sense, right? Giving you that flexibility. So what if you decide to migrate because ForgeRock is not meeting your needs that your organization is looking for? But how easy is it to migrate off of it? Because if it's too hard, most organizations do not take that journey, the next step to do so, right? What we're saying is that it doesn't have to be that tough to do so.
That's exactly right. I think you and I have both talked with customers repeatedly, ForgeRock customers, that talked about this almost a mountain that they climbed as they were deploying ForgeRock and setting up the policies that they needed. And it was a really resource intensive path to get to this nirvana at the top of the peak. And they finally have gotten there, and it takes a lot of resources and people to keep it running. But the concern is if they were ever to look at another IDP, another SSO solution for their SIAM users, they'd actually have to go all the way down that mountainside again and go up yet another mountain to another vendor. And so what we're suggesting, and I'll let you walk through these wireframes here, is perhaps a bridge between the peaks.
Absolutely. So the first one on the left here is kind of showing you how's your worlds today with the ForgeRock, right? In a sense that when the user is trying to get to your applications, they have to go through ForgeRock in order to get to these applications. So it's ForgeRock's meeting your needs there. What we're saying is that if you decide to get off of ForgeRock, when the user is trying to get to the same application, we're going to kind of sit in line with that. We're going to be in reverse proxy in a sense, so that when the user tries to get to the applications, you can configure what we call the Mavericks orchestrator to say, you know what, maybe some set of users, I want them to go to Okta or Microsoft Entra, or some set of users still use ForgeRock. The beauty is that gives you that flexibility that we constantly been telling organizations that what if you had that choice versus being forced to do it one way? Now you have many, many options to solve the problems that a lot of organizations are facing today.
Got it. Well, and I think it's actually really important as you show these two recipe illustrations here that we have a multitude of IDPs in that cloud. We have Microsoft Entra ID alongside Okta and ForgeRock, of course. And so the premise of today's episode, as we talked about life after ForgeRock, is that there may be a place where you're perfectly happy staying with ForgeRock. That like at the moment you're not looking to go anywhere else. We've heard and obviously Ping and ForgeRock have had their conversations with partners and customers both about what products they're keeping, which they're deprecating, which they're blending together into a new integrated approach. But what's happening there is someone else is setting your destiny. That in that scenario, you talked a little bit about M&A where. What happens when your IDPs get M&A'd and there's a merger and acquisition between your identity provider? And what we're talking about today is that flexibility. And so I think it's really important to call out that the migrations could be a very phased and measured approach. Is that right? This doesn't have to be a big bang cutover. You could actually employ multiple IDPs even.
Absolutely. I think that's one of the big strong points of the Strata solution is that you can have multiple IDPs at flight. Let me just kind of give you a personal story on this as well. So I came from One Login prior to joining Strata about a year and a half ago. At One Login, we're identity provider solution as well, IDP, and we got acquired by another organization, and so very similar to kind of what ForgeRock's going through. And the running joke was now we have to actually have two separate logins in order to log in to do our job instead of logging in once. So we actually have to have multiple IDPs at flight, but they weren't cohesive. They weren't working together. They were too disparate. So we have to log into subset of users using this set of credentials and totally different set of applications using another set of credentials. And from the employee standpoint, it was kind of a hassle because you got to memorize two separate things, to do your job, right, at the end of the day. One of the cool things about us is that you can have this set of users to say, I want them to authenticate this way, and different set of users authenticate this way. So they only need to remember one set of credentials, to get to the job there.
That's great. And so as we're thinking about migrations, then, if we're suggesting somebody was looking to migrate potentially off of ForgeRock to another SIAM platform, another SSO platform, they could do so in a phased fashion. It doesn't have to be this hard cutover. And also you'd be able to support if there was M&A activity where you acquired another company that had yet another IDP. It's funny that you mentioned the story you did because I actually went through a similar scenario with one of a large transaction fraud organization. And instead of getting two logins for one login, as you mentioned, I got two laptops. So managing a small team of 8 people, I actually got 2 different laptops, and I actually had to use those 2 different systems to manage the same 8 employees. And it's really wild to see the ways that M&A can affect organizations when not done correctly. So obviously not here to suggest anything about where how the ForgeRock and Ping M&A is taking place, but seriously, as that was announced, we know that customers are out there asking, I want to be able to have some flexibility and independence for myself. I want to be able to decide what I'm going to do next, not be told what's going to happen to me next. I think the other thing that's really interesting, we saw in a CSO article yesterday, was that a lot of organizations are looking to potentially downsize headcount in the year ahead. And so as we think about how many resources it took to get up that mountain of getting ForgeRock to that Nirvana place where you got those amazing policies and everything's working exactly as you wanted, could you still maintain that with fewer people? And that's kind of a scary proposition. And I love what we're bringing to the table is a way to, through orchestration, that you can actually, you can maintain that without the necessary headcount as you look about where you're going next in your path.
Absolutely. Another to piggyback off that, what if you guys are, if the organization's using, the Microsoft Entra ID, and what if you can offload some of your users to have them authenticate against that source versus, adding new user count to your ForgeRock situation, right? Because chances are Microsoft Entra, you're already paying for that through Office 365 or whatever licensing that you have with them. Chances that already includes some type of SSO with them. So why not leverage that fully to your advantage that way?
That's awesome. And then as we think about this, we don't have it listed here, but also let's say you're using ForgeRock Identity Cloud or Ping One, and there's a rainy day and you lose network connectivity because of the way the orchestrator works. You could also potentially fail over to an on-prem data store, could you not? And maintain on-prem identity practices?
Absolutely. Most big organizations use Active Directory or LDAP for your user depository. So if one of your IDPs having that rainy day, and it's typically, it's going to happen sometime, right? We all don't want to happen, but it does occur. And usually it's you have no options. You're really, because you're married to that, right? You're federated to that IDP. But with a solution like ours, you can quickly change over to a different source for your IDP or your repository for your authentication so that you can be up and running very quickly. And I actually can show you that in the kitchen today as well.
All right. Well, I know that you and I had so as Ping has acquired ForgeRock and it's all under the same umbrella, the same user login, same directory. I know we played around a little bit with a Ping One instance before. Let's go ahead and dig into a recipe and just talk about what it looks like to do that sort of a migration.
Absolutely. So this is our interface. We call it the Mavericks Orchestrator. It's really easy to use, just like typical SaaS solutions out there. On the left, you have what's called the Identity Fabric. So think of this as your toolbox. This is where, or your kitchen in a sense, where you're going to load up all your ingredients that you guys already have. So whether the organization is using, Azure, whether it's Hyper, Dual, or Ping, whatever that you want, you can load up all your tools into this toolbox. Left is you're going to have what's called applications. What applications that you want us to help you with? Whether it's proxy or HTTP header type apps, whether it's modern like SAML-based app or IDC or custom apps, you will load up your application stack here as well. Then this is really the magic of the whole thing, the user flow, the meat and potatoes of our solution. What do you want that user journey to go through for the application at hand? So for example, I have my Ping configuration here that says, when the user tries to get to this particular application, what do you want to have it occur? So if I scroll down my little bit of a configuration within our orchestrator, it says, in order to get to the resource, I want the users to be authenticated against my Ping. And then I can also allow additional authorization rule sets here as well, meaning I can grab resource attributes from different source. What I meant by that is, let's say you guys have an HR platform that has users, job title, department, or location info. Maybe use that in context to allow user through or deny a user or make them do MFA and so forth. But one of the beauties that you're seeing is that we don't need to sync up your user data to our solution. Typically, when you select an IDP, what is the very first thing they tell you to do? You need to sync up all your user source data into that solution, right? For us, we don't need to do that. You just need to tell us where your user data is located, and we'll go fetch it at runtime if it's needed. So it makes it really easy and flexible to get up and going there.
That's awesome. And I think that's also important as we think about, that's one of the reasons, as people were working with ForgeRock early on, is that it was really customizable on-prem software that they could have all these very specific ways to call out to these different stores. And what we're suggesting here is that through orchestration, we can maintain some of those all of those policies, those complex policies that they've built in, but we can do it as config. We're not rewriting the app. We're not having to go in and change things hard-coded into the application itself. You're simply doing it in the UI right here.
Absolutely. So let's actually see this from the end user's point of view to see what they're going to go through. So I'm going to open up a incognito window here and then go into my orchestration. So if I try to get to the application, so it looks like I already have a valid login. So let me close that out here.
And that's what happens when we're cooking live. You always have one of those scenarios. So yeah, love it.
Sorry, I had a little previous session. That's the reason why
all good.
already saw that.
There's no smoke and mirrors on this show.
Exactly. This is all live here. So let me go back here and then try to get to the application. And you notice that I got redirected to ping because that's what my user flow stated to do, right? So this is where I'm going to authenticate with my ping credentials. And then I'm able to get into the application. So super simple. And we can just handle the authentication if you want us to. We can also do the authorization, as I mentioned. So in this case, if I try to go to organization, I'm able to. Calendar, I'm able to go there. If I try to go to the executive reports, I get denied, right? So the reason why I got denied is if I go back to here, it says resource. But if I try to get to the reports, I'm going to get everybody denied. So that's the reason why I got denied there. That's not even our secret recipe just yet. This is really what I'm going to show you next is really the secret recipe or the secret style, what makes us unique. So on the left here.
Love it. You know how to tease the audience. That's the good stuff. Keep it going. Yes.
So let's say a scenario is that you want to move off of Ping or ForgeRock or whomever, right? Doesn't matter to us because we're agnostic. Or that IDP is having a rainy day. You need to get off of it very quickly. So I'm going to go back to my user flows here. Let's say I want to go to Okta because that's the solution that our organizations decide to go with. I'm going to deploy this, and it's actually going to deploy into my instance. So literally, it took me a couple clicks of the mouse and less than 10, 15 seconds of this happening. Now, if I go back into my system here and close this out and open up a brand new incognito window, and let's see what happens this time if the user tries to get to the same application. Once again, you did not have to touch the application for this to work. So you saw now that I'm able to authenticate against Okta or whomever that you guys are thinking about migrating over there.
Amazing. And so what you just showed is that bridge that we talked about, where it was this incredibly resource heavy lift. We happen to show the ping, but we're talking about ForgeRock as well as this incredibly heavy lift of getting up to the top of the peak and all this work. You didn't have to unwind all the way back down the mountain and all the way climbing back up to Okta. You literally just made some configuration changes in the UI.
That's correct. That's all you did. And in some cases, like you mentioned in the beginning of today's orchestration kitchen, is that what if you want to have multiple IDPs at the same time, right? What if the MMA situation where you want to use ForgeRock or Ping for a subset of users and different set of users use a different IDP, right? That's also a very common thing that we're noticing. Traditionally, that wasn't the case because traditionally, when you do MMA, what you have to do is bring all that user identity of that one that you acquire to your identity provider. So you got to bring everybody into the one set and then give them access. Traditionally, that takes tons of time, effort, and energy to do so. So most people have to sit around for months to get access typically, or they just can't get that two separate logins in a sense, right? What we're saying is that what if you're able to get that up and going very quickly? Let me show you how that gets done there as well. So let me go back to my user flows, which once again, this is like the meat and potatoes of the whole thing. I'm going to go into the IDP switcher. So what my IDP switcher is going to do is allow me to select different IDP based on the user context. And that user context could be based on, in my demo, I made it super simple where looks like it didn't get deployed. So let me deploy it once again.
Okay.
I'm going to deploy it real quickly.
And user context could be, I come in as Chef Mark at Strata, or if I just come in as Mark, single username, the user context could be how I'm used to signing in, what that username is. It's automatically going to use that to decide the path then?
Yes, so it could be about the user attributes. So for example, it could be based on their department info, or it could be based on job title. My example is very simple where it's based on the domain of that user to route them appropriately, right? Because you acquire a company, chances are they're the acme.com or abc.com. They're not currently your xyz.com, right? So there's a distinct differentiation of the user of which company they belong to, and that's what's going to determine where to route that user. So let's actually see it from the end user's point of view, because it's going to make a little bit more sense there. So let me bring up my orchestration. So I created this web page on my orchestrator, or you can create your own website and point it to there. It doesn't matter to us. Made it really simple here. So as you can see on mine, it says just tell me your email address so we can route you properly. But for the organization, you can totally customize it, right? You can say provide your organization or location info, job title, or whatever information. Once again, as long as we can connect to your attribute source, you can use any attributes to determine who the user is, to determine how you route them, right? So in this case, if I try to go to my corporate domain, strata.io, and try to get in, it's going to route to our Azure, because that's what we use for IDP, right? But if I try to use a totally different domain, in this case, let's say acme.com, it's going to route to my Okta instance or whomever that you like. So in most organizations, if they're using ForgeRock and they're quite happy with it right now, and maybe because I think about switching to a totally different IDP, you can do that slow migration or that bridge that you mentioned, right? Subset of users, have them go to ForgeRock still, and subset of users go to your new IDP, and then you can transition at your own time versus being forced to do it, right? So that's really the beauty there.
So Charles asks a question about, so is Strata another IDP, or do I still need a SSO vendor?
So we're not an IDP. We can act as an IDP if you want to, but traditionally we're not an IDP. So you still need an IDP, whether it's going to be Azure, Active Directory, LDAP, Okta, Ping, whomever that you want them to be there.
Got it. Got it. Okay. Well, I think the premise of today's episode was really just to talk about possibilities. We weren't here to, suggest that somebody has to go somewhere else, but we wanted to give people the flexibility and understand that there's another way to think about this. If you're a current ForgeRock customer, I know that there's a lot of questions, a lot of unknowns about what happens when your solution is being blended with another, what lives, what doesn't, when the private equity organization, what's going to be sunsetted and that sort of thing. But what we're caring about today is honestly more about charting your own destiny, the flexibility to make these own decisions, the flexibility to have a failover and resilience to another IDP, the flexibility to have climbed that gigantic mountain that you did, resource intensive mountain, to get ForgeRock where it is today, and finding out that you don't have to go all the way back down the mountain and up yet another mountain. If you choose to go to another IDP, you can literally bridge across, as you showed with our Okta migration scenario today, Chef Tony.
Absolutely. I think that was one of the key takeaways that I want people to have, is that most people, probably did not know that this type of technology or solutions available to them. They always thought that when you select an IDP, you're there for a long haul. In one sense, that is a good thing, right? You're forcing everybody to authenticate one way. But as organizations grow, though, and as the environments change, that doesn't always work, right? That's where that flexibility really comes in handy.
I love it. I love it. Well, and especially with a software intensive approach like, ForgeRock or PingFed, when it's hard coded, identity is hard coded into your applications, it feels like even further lock in. And everything we showed today was without rewriting the apps. Everything we talked about today was purely abstracted above and beyond that. So you don't have to worry about whether you still have the source code or not. So I think that's really cool that we were able to show the flexibility, the agility, the other choices that organizations have beyond ForgeRock. And so, Chef Tony, I want to thank you for joining us today. As always, you can go to the Orchestration Kitchen Hub to see our previous recorded episodes, as well as to see what's coming next down the pike. And Chef Tony, what if somebody wanted to get in and actually experiment a little bit with themselves?
Absolutely. We would love people to sign up for our trial, and you go to mavericks.strata.io. It's a free sign up, and you can actually play with the UI that I was showcasing today. And if you want to schedule a one-on-one time with me, I can guide you through some of the workflows that you would desire to kind of learn more about. Please do contact me. I would love to help you out. And it's Tony@strata.io.
Well, appreciate you, Chef Tony, and obviously appreciate our audience. We love sharing these solutions to really spicy challenges that come our way. And hopefully you've seen today, again, just sort of scratching a little bit of the surface, but showing that there is life after ForgeRock. There are other options. You do have choices, and you can set your own identity destiny. So, Tony, without further ado, I think we'll call this one a wrap. Thank you so much, Chef Tony, for joining us, and we look forward to having our audience join us again in the future. Take care.
Take care. Thank you.